Welcome to the Buddhistisches Berlin podcast. Join us for live recordings from classes, insightful talks, and guided meditations.
But the four things that I want to do is I want to introduce you to an image. So the image is called the Refuge Tree. And then I want to talk about Śāntideva's life. And then I want to probably read 3 stanzas, so 3 verses from a text that he recited or a teaching that he gave, which is called the Bodhicariyavatara. And then I want to make a few comments kind of on those verses. Yeah, so that's it really. So in terms of the image of the refuge tree, I was thinking that one time I was sat at the back of the shrine room. Can you find a place? And maybe partly because I've been working on that image of the Wheel of Life, and I've been thinking about the Buddhist Centre as a space and the Buddhist Centre in terms of images, you know, like kind of what might be good in terms of Buddhist images for the space. And there was one time when I was sat at the back, and I kind of thought, what this needs really is it needs the image of the refuge tree. So the refuge tree, the image comes from a particular practice. So it's a practice that people do when they're training for ordination. It's called the going for refuge and prostration practice. So I'm going to describe to you the image. So there's an image of it on the shrine, which probably not a lot of you can see because it's so small, but we're going to imagine it together. And the way I was imagining the image when I was sat at the back was I was kind of using the sort of sense of the scale of the Buddha to give me a sense of how big the image would be. So what we've got here, so I suppose I was also thinking that the shrine itself doesn't really capture Buddhism. Now, you've got one image, generally the Buddha, the historical Buddha, but actually Buddhism has a lot more, there's a lot more to Buddhism than the historical Buddha. However, in the image, and very rightly so, the image of the Buddha is central, and the image of the Buddha is the biggest image of the image. And how it appears is that, so if you imagined that everything just dissolved, so the room kind of dissolves, although we're using the room in terms of scale, and it dissolves into the blue sky. And then what emerges is a rainbow-coloured cloud. And then from the rainbow-coloured cloud emerges a kind of tree. A tree sort of grows up from this cloud. And it's a little bit like, the shape of it is a little bit like a candelabra. So it's got a number of very large lotuses kind of that are going in the different directions. And the central lotus, the biggest lotus, holds 3 figures. So I want you to imagine it this kind of size. Yeah. So you've got the historical Buddha in the middle, and then to the left, kind of on the same lotus but a little bit lower, you've got another Buddha figure. So that is the Buddha of the distant past, so Dipankara. And then on the right-hand side, so yeah, your right-hand side, there's another Buddha figure, and that is Maitreya, the Buddha of the future. Yeah, so we're within the time of the Buddha Shakyamuni. But there's a sense that there's a Buddha in the distant past and there's a Buddha to come when all of the teachings of Shakyamuni disappear. And then there's a kind of lotus which is kind of coming out more towards us. It's the closest lotus to us. And on that lotus is the teacher and founder of this tradition. So it's our refuge tree. It's the refuge tree of Triratna Buddhist community. So it's got our teacher on it, Sangharakshita. And then also on that lotus, it's got his 8 principal teachers. So people that he learnt the Dharma from. So they're all quite kind of renowned Buddhists. So that's the lotus that's closest to us. And then you've got a lotus which is kind of like, so if this sort of size is the Buddha Dipankara, then to scale, there's a sort of lotus which is over here, and it's kind of going out of the room, it's so big. So there's a lotus on the left, and there's a lotus on the right. On the left, there are 5 figures, the 5 archetypal bodhisattvas. So, for instance, figures like Green Tara, Avalokiteshvara, to name a couple. And then on the other lotus, on the other side, is some of the disciples of the historical Buddha. Yeah, that's what's on the other side. And then behind the Buddha, on another lotus, there's a whole load of Dharma texts. So kind of all of the teachings that have been given and the commentaries and all the rest of it, they're all kind of behind the Buddha, almost a bit like a kind of mountain. And then starting to go upwards, and again, like kind of the image would go above this room, you've kind of got a pyramid of figures. And they're the teachers of the past, so the historical teachers. And they're kind of in rows. So it's not all of the teachers from these lands, but it's got a row of Japanese teachers. It's got a row of Chinese teachers. It's got a row of Tibetan teachers. And it's got a row of Indian teachers. That's not all. Above that kind of goes up to like a kind of peak. And then, well, maybe you can use that as a sort of image. So this sort of the circularness of the lights, there's a kind of mandala that's formed right at the very top. So it's a mandala of 5 Buddhas. And there are 4 Buddhas in each of the directions, and there's 1 Buddha in the centre. And they're all different colours. Yeah, the centre one's white, the one nearest to us is blue, then there's a yellow Buddha, there's a red Buddha, there's a green Buddha. And then even further up than that is another figure, Vajrasattva. So this is our refuge tree. And it kind of gives you a sense, so if you ever do something like the sevenfold puja, a kind of devotional practice, it's a very good image if you have kind of familiarised yourself with it a little bit, to imagine. So it gives you a sense of Buddhism in terms of the distant past, the future. It gives you a sense of history, so the Buddha's historical disciples and the teachers of the past. It gives you a sense of the archetypal figures, so figures that we could probably, well, in a way we're imagining it all, but are more accessible through the imagination. And then you've got these other archetypal figures that are right at the top. So within this image, there is a figure right near the top. He's one of the Indian teachers, and that figure is Śāntideva. I think he was, I kept on meaning to do this to sort of look up. He was kind of around, I think, 400s, 500s, something like that, in terms of time. So he's a historical figure. And this is the person that gave this particular teaching, called the Bodhicariyavatara. And we don't really know for sure about his life. We've kind of got a myth, yeah, about his life. Maybe what might have happened, it might have been elaborated a bit, but we've got some kind of myth. So the story goes that Śāntideva, when he was living, apparently he was a very accomplished practitioner. He'd had visions of kind of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. He'd received teachings from them. And he became part of a very esteemed, at the time, Buddhist university in India called Nalanda. So he was there in this kind of monastic community. So although he was quite accomplished, the people that were around him, this is what some of the Tibetan teachers say, and have quite a joke about this really. They say all that they could see of him is that all he seemed to do to them, do from their point of view, is just laze around. And they said that all they could see him doing was eating, sleeping and shitting. That was it. That's all he did. So they decide to humiliate him. Yeah, they've got no idea. They think he's just lazing around, doing nothing. They're probably studying kind of like all day, all night, all the rest of it, quite intensive situation. So they decide to humiliate him. And they ask him to give a teaching. And he says no. And then they keep on persisting. And he says, yeah, okay then. And then the first way that they try to humiliate him is because he wants a teaching seat. So the teaching seats generally are quite high. Yeah? But they build this teaching seat so high that actually he wouldn't be able to get up on it. So the story goes that you can imagine that he comes in to give this teaching. The teaching seat is so high, and all of the monks are kind of giggling. They're kind of waiting to see him kind of not be able to get up on the top. And apparently he just, with his hand, he just reaches up and kind of through his magical powers, they say, he just very easily sits himself on the seat. And then he asks them all, what would you like me to teach? Something old or something new? And they say to him, I would like you to give a new teaching. So then he starts to recite. And imagining that they think he's completely lazy. And he recites this text. Yeah. So the text is on the shrine. It's called the Bodhicariyavatara. The way of the Bodhisattva. That's how it translates. And there's a number of translations of the text. And there are also a number of commentaries on the text. Sangharakshita's given a commentary, Pema Chodron's given a commentary, the Dalai Lama's given a commentary, another Tibetan teacher's given a commentary. There's lots of commentaries that haven't been translated. So there's quite a lot to it. There's 10 chapters. And I would also say, if you decide to read it, so it's a text that's studied a lot kind of within the 4 schools of Tibetan Buddhism, and we also study it when if you're on the long ordination course say like I was on myself, you study this text. Kind of, it's one of the texts that you study. So I got a bit sidetracked there. I was going to say something, and then whatever I was going to say is gone. Anyway, it might come back. So, oh yeah, that was it. The text is very challenging in parts, actually. So that's the warning. If you're going to read it, you probably will be challenged by some of the logic and some of the things that Śāntideva says. Yeah. But actually, for some people, like myself, I quite like that kind of Dharma. And it also got put into, on our ordination course, some of the text got made into a puja, so a devotional practice. So we was doing this particular practice, the Bodhicariyavatara puja, every night for quite a while. And it really, once you get into the rhythm of it, it really sticks kind of in your mind. So there are certain verses that, just for me, maybe there's one that I'd quite like to give a talk on at some point. I haven't chosen it today, but actually it holds something for me. It's kind of like it inspires me. I don't quite know why, but it does. It just keeps on coming back. So I'm going to read you these 3 stanzas. I think that's what you call them. So one of them's from chapter 3, and 2 of them are from chapter 1, the first chapter. So this is what he recites, some of what he recites, a very small portion. He says, just as a blind person may find by chance a priceless jewel in a heap of refuse, so somehow this Bodhi-spirit is hidden even in me. so hard to find such ease and wealth, whereby to render meaningful this human birth. If now I fail to turn it to my profit, how could such a chance be mine again? As when a flash of lightning rends the night, and in its glare shows all the dark black clouds had hid. Likewise, rarely, through the Buddha's power, virtuous thoughts rise brief and transient in the world. So just as a blind person may find by chance a priceless jewel in a heap of refuse, so somehow this Bodhi-spirit is hidden even in me. So it's significant that the image starts with a blind person. So if you look at this image here, the kind of wheel of life, the image that kind of confronts you as you come into the Buddhist center, right near the top, underneath one of the fangs, you see a person with a stick kind of trying to find their way, so a blind person. So this is kind of our starting point, yeah? We are blind. So we've been born blind. Why are we blind? We're blind because we do not see. We don't see things as they actually are. We don't see, for instance, really, that actions have consequences. We don't really see karma. We don't see that everything is impermanent. We don't see that nothing in conditioned existence can give us lasting happiness. We don't see that everything is insubstantial. However, this blind person finds, by chance, a priceless jewel in a heap of refuse. And it's hidden kind of within them. So this is one way of talking about, so on the one hand, we're born ignorant. On the other hand, hidden within us is a priceless jewel. So it's hidden, it's covered over, but it is there, and it is there in everybody. So what is, so it says, so somehow this Bodhi-spirit is hidden even in me. So what is this Bodhi-spirit that's hidden in me? So the Bodhi-spirit is what's called the Bodhicitta, the will to enlightenment for the sake of all beings is hidden within me, within you, within us, within everybody. So what to say about the Bodhicitta? So it means the will to enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And it's what has to be awakened when you decide to practice this particular version of the path. So what's called the Bodhisattva ideal. The Bodhisattva takes a vow to gain enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And they practice in order to awaken the bodhicitta, which leads towards the alleviation of suffering. And the bodhicitta has got two aspects. So it's got an aspect which you could call the absolute, which is enlightenment itself. Yeah, and it's got a relative aspect. So it's kind of got, it's got the goal, and it's got the path, and it's got a very particular formulation of the path. So Sangharakshita says that the seed of the bodhicitta is metta, is loving kindness. That's the seed of the bodhicitta. So already this morning we have started to warm up that seed a little bit. Maybe we've given it a little bit of water or whatever. So the seed of the bodhicitta is loving kindness. And the practices that are said to bring it about, so the path, there are a few things that allow us to find it, you could say, what's hidden. So there is the practice of the four Brahma Viharas. So one of them I've just mentioned. Brahma Viharas means realm of the gods or goddesses. So the first one is loving kindness. That's a meditation practice. Then there's sympathetic joy, the meditation on sympathetic joy, the meditation on compassion, the meditation on equanimity. So they're what are called the four Brahma Viharas, and they're said to bring about the arising of the bodhicitta, the will to enlightenment for the sake of all beings. The other thing that's said to bring it about is a particular formulation of the path called the six paramitas. So generosity, ethics, energy, patience, meditation, and wisdom. And then the other thing that's said to bring it about is the practice of the sevenfold puja, so this devotional practice that I kind of mentioned that we do sort of within our tradition. So you can kind of engage in all of those things. Okay. So this is the second verse, or at least the verse that I picked. So hard to find such ease and wealth, whereby to render meaningful this human birth. If now I fail to turn it to my profit, how could such a chance be mine again? So hard to find such ease and wealth, whereby to render meaningful this human birth. If now I fail to turn it to my profit, how could such a chance be mine again? Oh yeah, the other thing that I was going to mention about the bodhicitta, you could also see it as the Dharma itself. Yeah, it is, because there's an element of it which is to do with the path. It is the Dharma itself. So you've come here to the Buddhist Center, you've meditated, you're hearing a Dharma talk. So in a sense, it's like you have already, to some degree, come into contact or began to uncover that jewel, the jewel of the Dharma. But this verse is kind of, I suppose what I'm going to say is might be a bit challenging actually. So it's saying that there is this potential within us, yeah, to awaken. And there's a potential that we can do that for the sake of all beings. And it's saying, so hard to find such ease and wealth, whereby to render meaningful this human birth. So from the point of view of Buddhism, the human birth is very precious. And it's kind of saying that Śāntideva is assuming that we know that the human birth is very precious. And probably for most of us in the West, there is a sense of ease and wealth. Yeah, we're not completely, well, some of us might be, run off our feet. We have got some free time. We've got enough money, kind of all the rest of it. But this life, this is one of the challenging things, is a fading window of opportunity. It is brief. So there was another text that was kind of in my mind, but I can't quite get to it. Anyway, life is brief. Yeah, we haven't got much time. We've come into contact with the Dharma. So what are we going to do in the time that we've got left. And it is worth reflecting that, so this is what I was reading, this is what's been on my mind for the past few weeks, that actually some of us, 1, 2, who knows, somebody probably will die within the next year or 2 years or 5 years. Kind of one of us. One of us might be so ill that actually it's really hard to practice the Dharma because you're in a lot of pain. It's not impossible, because actually there's an order member and quite a few people that I know who are in quite a lot of pain that practice, but it makes it a lot more difficult. At the moment we've got our health, we've got our intelligence, we've got a possibility to study the Dharma, we've got a desire to meditate. All of those things are really important. But the other thing is, it's like you come along, you get interested, there's a lot of energy getting put into your practice, and then something comes and takes you off in a direction. So again, I suppose, like I said, what I'm going to say to you is a bit challenging. And the text that I was reading was saying that could happen, so this distraction could last for a year, for 2 years, for 10 years, or for the rest of your life. So you found the precious jewel and you just get distracted by something. And yeah, not that it hasn't had an effect, but actually you kind of stop. Yeah, you get too consumed in something and it just takes you off. You lose your conditions, you lose your supportive conditions. Supportive conditions are super important. Yeah, they are. In a way, that is all we've got, really. We've got conditions that we can put in place to help us to practice and keep us practicing. And when we start dropping off conditions here and there, well, then at some point, your practice just disappears. So that's one thing, you get distracted. The other thing is that sometimes life is so pleasurable, so luxurious, so cozy, that you have not got any inclination to practice. Your life is running so smoothly that who needs the Dharma at that point? You're happy. Maybe you think you've made it. Yeah. And what can happen then is that you become a little bit indifferent to the sufferings of other people. It is like, I was thinking, it is like in the Wheel of Life, you've got this top realm of the 6, which is the God realm. It's like some people do live in a God realm. Yeah, we can live in a God realm for a period of time. So the Buddha is saying that human existence apparently has got the right amount of pleasure and pain. Well, maybe if you're in human existence, you're living in a God realm, you've got too much pleasure, but it's got the right amount of pleasure and pain to keep you motivated. Okay. So you've got a choice at this point. I could just stop and take questions, or I could carry on with the next verse, which probably means that I'll run up to 1 o'clock and then there won't be any chance for questions. What do you fancy?
Yeah, continue.
Continue? Okay. I quite like getting questions, but so the last verse.
Some people might not know what the word Dharma is.
Oh yeah. So Dharma is the teachings of the Buddha, and it's also the truth that you realise. Yeah. Enlightenment itself can also be called the Dharma, or the truth. So last verse. As when a flash of lightning rends the night, and in its glare shows all dark black clouds had hid. It's a bit of a complicated sentence, isn't it? Likewise, rarely, through the Buddha's power, virtuous thoughts rise, brief and transient in the world. So is that saying that we hardly ever have a virtuous thought. I don't think it is, actually. I think what it's getting at is that from this perspective, the perspective of the Bodhisattva path, the virtuous thoughts that we're talking about are completely without self. They are completely selfless. So those things happen very rarely. Yeah? We act skillfully, we act ethically, but often, somewhere, there is me. Yeah, I want something from acting like this, from giving, whether that's being seen in a particular way or whatever it is. So the bodhicitta is concerned with other people. This is the kind of what the whole bodhisattva path is about, really. It's very altruistic in nature. It's very much about going beyond yourself. So at one point, a few weeks back, I said there are different ways of looking at the path. One way, in terms of wisdom, one way is that we see through self. We see through all of the things that make up a self. Another way of seeing things from the perspective of wisdom is that we go beyond self. Yeah? And it's sometimes talked about as not just going beyond, but exchanging self for other. So we really do go beyond. We forget. Well, in a sense, Buddhism is saying there has never been a self there. But actually we, in our ignorance, think there is. But what is also interesting for me in this is that it says, likewise rarely through the Buddha's power, virtuous thoughts rise. So in the first instance, in the very first stanza that I read, it was saying that the bodhicitta is hidden. Yeah? So it's kind of hidden, there's a jewel there, it's covered up, we need to discover it. In this instance, it's saying that or the way it can feel when we start to act selflessly is it can feel as if the kind of motivation has sort of come from somewhere else. It's so not how we usually operate that it feels like it comes from outside. So that is what it means by rarely through the Buddha's power. You could say a sense of like, you feel a bit like you've been blessed. You know, your life is kind of going in a way where you're starting to act a lot more altruistically, coming in relationship to Buddhism. So I thought I would finish the thing with something a little bit more practical, a bit more down to earth, because this is what I've been looking at over the past little while. Since I've started to look at this more deeply into the Bodhisattva path, I've been trying to do something. So what I've been trying to do is, well, two things. Or there are two things that you need to do. The first thing is you need to pay attention to other people. So you need to really take them in. You need to look at them. You need to have a sense of their lives. If you're living with people, it gives you quite a lot of opportunity, but also going around Berlin, there's also lots of opportunity. So what I've been trying to do is notice, when does an altruistic thought arise in my mind? Yeah, somebody wants some money, they're begging. Maybe I want to give. Obviously you choose, yeah or no. But I've been trying to choose to do the altruistic thought. Yeah, whatever it is. Somebody needs help, offer help. The pots need washing, wash the pots. The bin needs taking out, do the bin. But also watch that tension between, you see the thing, and actually you sense yourself. Yeah, I don't want to do that. I am too tired. Why are other people not doing it? All of these kind of things. And then choose. It's fine so this is what I want to encourage you to do. It's fine not to do it. Yeah, you have the altruistic thought and you decide in this moment, no. Sometimes there are good reasons for that, particularly if you're the sort of person that always overextends himself. Yeah, this is probably the danger of the Bodhisattva path. So it's funny that Dhiradevi is here today, because she was my example of this, working with this the other day. So I was downstairs in the cellar, and I was drawing, and she was in the office. Doing stuff to do with the Roterberg, and I'd brought with me 3 chocolate biscuits. Now for me, 3 chocolate biscuits go perfect with a cup of tea. That amount of chocolate biscuits is just the right amount of chocolate biscuits for a cup of tea. But the thought arose, maybe Dhiradevi would like one. And I noticed that sense of like, no, I don't want to give her a biscuit. And there was a little bit of time lapse, like kind of like, I will have one less, won't I? Well, maybe more or less. But I kind of clocked the thought. The thought is there. Why don't you just give her a biscuit? So I did, actually. I gave her a biscuit. So it's not gigantic bodhisattva activity. But every little drop is kind of what fills the bucket, yeah. So that in terms of something to take away from this talk, if you're interested, that would be it. Notice when you have an altruistic impulse, and choose, yeah. And like I say, you don't have to follow it. Sometimes you don't follow it for good reasons, but sometimes you just don't follow it. if you're really honest. Because you're selfish and you don't want to give up. I don't want to give up that chocolate biscuit. Those 3 are perfect for me. But actually, it also brings joy. Like it was lovely to see Dhiradevi eat one of my chocolate biscuits. Well, she seemed to really enjoy it. I did think afterwards, I thought, well, actually, it's interesting is that I did keep 2 for myself. I could have just given her the whole thing and just said, there's 3 chocolate biscuits there, you can have them. Although probably part of me would have been thinking, I hope she gives me one. So anyway, that's it.